Hello, and greetings from Axiom Space's Mission Control Center here in Houston, Texas. I'm Bettina Inclon. Thank you for joining us for today's Ax-1 post-mission press conference as we discuss the first all-private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. Joining us today is the crew of Ax-1. First is Commander Michael Lopez Alegria, Pilot Larry Connor, Mission Specialist Eitan Stibe, and Mission Specialist Mark Pathy. In a few moments, this team will answer questions from the press, but before that, they're going to talk a little bit about their experience in space. When they start taking questions from the reporters, they'll be joined by our president and CEO, Axiom's Michael Suffredini. This crew launched from NASA to Kennedy's Space Center on April 8th to the International Space Station. What started off as 10 days in space, including 8 days on the ISS, extended to over 17 days in space. They did incredible things in microgravity, including over 25 different experiments, 30 outreach events, and opened a huge new chapter in commercial space. Now we're excited to hear from them about their experience, so I'm going to turn it over to our commander, Michael Lopez Alegria.
Thanks, Bettina. First of all, it's wonderful for us to be here with you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be viewing from. As Bettina says, this sort of opened a new chapter in commercial human spaceflight. In human spaceflight, actually, for the longest time, it's been only government astronauts going to space, and of course, this is the first all-private mission to the International Space Station, and feel very privileged to have participated in that. I think what's most interesting to folks is to hear our personal experiences, and I want to get to them in just a second. But let me just echo a few things that Bettina said about how we conducted 25 experiments, over 100 hours of research, which by any measure on the ISS is a lot of throughput. We had over 30 outreach events to school kids and other audiences around the world. And I think most importantly, we opened this experience up to people who otherwise would not have had a chance to do that. So I'm grateful to, of course, Axiom, SpaceX, NASA, all of our partners that have participated in this to make this a reality. So I want to address my colleagues here. And I think what I want to do is start from the moment that I remember probably most from the mission, which is after insertion. So we're in space for maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I'm still in my seat. You guys are all sort of getting out, and you look out the window for the first time, and you see this beautiful planet Earth below us. Larry, your thoughts?
Spectacular. You can try to explain it to people. You can see photographs. But until you have the opportunity to do it, you can't really understand what it's like. But I also think at that point, you have to think about the responsibility we have. We're the first all-citizen group going to the International Space Station. Tremendous opportunity, but tremendous responsibility. So, it was the first step in many steps that were exhilarating and unique.
You mentioned this view and how difficult it is to describe to people who haven't been there, and that combined, I think, with the sensation of floating and going around the planet every 90 minutes, all combined to provide something that's often called the overview effect. And I've long said that we need to expand the experience, the group of people that have had that experience, to more folks. In even a relatively short 17-day mission, Eitan, do you think that you got a sense of that overview effect where you look down at the Earth, you don't see the borders between countries, you don't see conflict? It seems like a beautiful yet fragile place.
It does, especially that you see the atmosphere surrounding the Earth. You see the different colors of the atmosphere in different times of the day and night, sometimes green, red, brown, and it looks so fragile. And then remembering that the face of Earth is only 100 kilometers, space is about 100 kilometers, so all humanity, life, vegetation is concentrated in this very sensitive 200-kilometer space. And when you watch it and you see it, it's just incredible.
Mark, I know that you really took to taking photography out of the cupola. I think that was some of the science activity that you did, but also you spent a lot of time, sort of with your nose up against the window, just looking. What imagery is in your head about those 17 days, and what stuck with you?
I mean, first of all, the diversity of what I was looking at through the lens, and when I had the opportunity without looking through the lens, was incredible. And to me, it was, it was a visceral, emotional reaction to what I was looking at. That I knew about the overview effect, of course, going into this experience, and I didn't quite know exactly what it was, and I can't really describe it in words now, but it's really just an emotional, overwhelming reaction that I felt looking at the Earth and its diverse landscape and fragile beauty, and on the other side the sort of dark coldness of space, and a sensation of how actually alone we are. It seems, hopefully not, and hopefully exploration will lead to more answers on that front. But it just seems like it's incredible that this Earth exists in the vastness of otherwise empty space.
Yeah, Larry, a handful of people, I think a small handful, have been to the depths of the oceans and into space. You're the only person that's ever done it within a year. Obviously, some similarities, some differences.
Sure.
You have gravity at the bottom of the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
So compare and contrast that, and how do you think that the underwater experience prepared you to be a pilot on a spacecraft?
Sure. In some regards, they are the same, but in many they're completely different. So when I went to the bottom of the ocean, the number one theme was research. Same thing in this mission for all of us. And so along with that came responsibilities. We did 3 dives, 36,000 feet, 35,000 feet, and 25,000 feet over the span of a week. And we're supported by 7 scientists, and hopefully have done some groundbreaking research. Same thing is true with our mission. I think that's important to emphasize, that we weren't up there just to be spectators. We were clearly not tourists. We trained to a number of the NASA professional astronaut standards. And as you said, Mike, we did over 25 different experiments, over 100 hours, over 30 outreach. And by the way, outreach not only here in the United States, but worldwide. And so while 2 different missions, I think some of the themes were very, very similar. People have asked me, would you take one over the other? I think that's a hard call, but if pressed, I'd probably have to say, the Ax-1 mission, because for me, I think it was the most extraordinary and unique experience in my entire life.
Yeah. So Eitan, you're the second Israeli astronaut. I know that you have ties with the Ramon family, and you were squadron mates with Elon. Can you talk about that relationship, first of all, and then what do you think this means to the country of Israel?
The relationship is very close, still with the kids, and they part of them came to the launch and followed the mission closely, and the tension around the return to Earth was not only theirs, but the whole country was holding their breath to see that it passes well, those 7 minutes of loss of contact, and everyone was very happy and satisfied that it ended as it did. It changed the feeling about human space flight in Israel. Till our mission, human space flight was considered very risky, related to tragedy, and most of the space activities in Israel and industry and the government were concentrated on satellite, on unmanned missions. And I think we opened the door for human space flight, for people to look at that, to be more involved in the ISS and in the future private space station that Axiom is planning, and to see how astronauts and what is a unique part of participation of humans in in this area.
So Mark, you have 3 small children, and you're not allowed to pick your favorite, so I won't ask you to pick your favorite experiment, but what 2 or 3 did you really enjoy doing while you were aboard?
It's hard. I say hard to choose, and almost like choosing your favorite child. But I mean, I think there were some particularly exciting achievements, and I would say a few that stand out. The first two-way holoportation, successful two-way holoportation between space and the Earth was one of those, and I was really happy to be a part of that. I think we did some exciting eye research and some novel testing in SANS, which is a space-related eye condition that hopefully will lead to better treatment and prevention measures for future astronauts and space missions. And I think some very interesting experiments in the area of, there's a number of areas: pain and inflammation, the microbiome, which I think is an exciting new area of research, relatively new research. So, and there's too many to mention, but a lot of really exciting stuff there.
So we've just kind of had a conversation about our experiences, but I imagine that there are some questions that the news media might want to ask. So let me pass it back over to Bettina to moderate those questions.
Thank you so much, Mike. What a great conversation. One of the things I really enjoyed during this time is, before we started, just to give the reporters on the line, just as a heads up, if you want to ask a question, you can either raise your hand or submit it in the chat so we can know that you're interested in answering the question. As we wait for that to populate, I'll share a little tidbit here. As the team was here, they haven't really had a chance to see a lot of the visuals that come out of space. So it was fun watching them watch themselves of their experiences and the broadcast that we did. So if you have a chance, you could watch that on the Axiom Space webcast. So now we'll start taking questions from reporters on the line. With us now is also our CEO and President, Michael Sabardini, who has joined us at the table with the crew to address questions as well. Our first question will come from Irene Klotz from Aviation Week. Irene, your line is open. Irene? As we figure out our technical difficulties, I don't hear Irene. Irene?
Space to ground too.
How about now?
Oh, yes, perfect. Thank you so much,
Okay.
Irene. Line's open.
Work this time. Thank you so much. And thanks for you all for taking the time today. I have a question for both Mike L.A. and for Seth. What can you give us maybe 2 or 3 examples of what could be done to mitigate the impact of visiting crews on ISS crew members' time? Or is this something that NASA is just going to need to figure out how to do in hosting these commercial missions? Thanks.
Hey Irene, let me start and just say, first of all, we're very grateful for the Crew 3 crew, as they're called, the USOS crew that was on board while we were there. Extraordinarily helpful, gracious, kind, sharing. I mean, I can't say enough good things about them. And we really needed them. I mean, we'll be honest and say that our timeline was very aggressive, especially early in the mission. And it's tough to prepare any better than we did. I just don't, there is a certain learning curve that you have to go through when you get to space, and even professionally trained astronauts go through it too. As a matter of fact, NASA generally schedules some free time for them the first few days. We chose not to take that path. We might want to rethink that in the future, because I think the pace was frenetic in the beginning. But it's really, the answer is training. It's always going to come down to that.
Yeah, I think that's right. Irene, a big thing for us for this mission, we always knew was going to be what we learned along the way. So we didn't expect that we would be carefree for the crew, and we had prepared for that. The ISS crew, as Mike said, was wonderful. They really stepped in, and it was just a great experience. There are specific things. there's quite a few lessons learned that we're working on together with NASA and SpaceX, so that we, on the next flight, we make improvements. There are specific things we can do to address some of those issues. The one that comes to mind is the first day is fairly well known, all the steps we have to do to configure the spacecraft, just in case we have to go home quickly, and we believe we can mock that up and actually train that specifically on the ground, and that'll help alleviate some of the challenges with the schedule on the first day or so. So we'll look at a number of things like that. As Mike said, really in the end it's going to be about how you do your training, how we prepare. You don't want to be too, if you try to dictate everything so that you're training at a level that gets everybody knowing everything they're doing every day, it's really not the kind of mission that gives you the flexibility to react to issues and whatnot. So you don't want to get too carried away with that. There are some certain instances that we can prepare for a little bit more. The other thing we'll do, I think, is we'll try to set the timeline up so that there are objectives that are going to get done and objectives that could easily come off timeline if necessary. So there's a number of things we'll look at overall as part of the lessons learned on this flight that we'll apply to the next mission.
Thank you. We'll take our next question from Marcia Smith. Marcia, your line is open.
Thanks so much. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to follow up on Irene's question, actually. And I'm curious, from the 3 astronauts who were up there for the first time, what was it that surprised you about conducting your scientific experiments that meant that you needed more help from the crew? Was there anything in particular that you can feed back into Axiom as to how to better train the next crews? Was it just a matter of adjusting to weightlessness, or was it actually conducting experiments? What was it that was such a challenge?
Well, I would have 2 thoughts. One, maybe a little different to Irene's question. I think, in fact, we can be an asset, not a detriment to the NASA crews there. And one of the things that we endeavored to do was help them in any small way that we can. There's no question that we had a very, very aggressive schedule. So I don't think necessarily we can't not act in unison and together with both the private crews and the professional crews to the betterment of the experiment platform that's being conducted on the ISS. That would be number one. Number two is one of the things that we all learn, Mike alluded to it, is that, and Mike L.A. alluded to it, was with the value of hindsight, we were way too aggressive on our schedule, in particular the first couple days. We'll fix that issue going forward. And then the other piece is the learning experience, Mike, as you said. Until you've actually done it, you don't know what you don't know. And the fact of the matter is, some of the experiments, for example, the first one I did with Mayo Clinic was scheduled for 2.5 hours. And it turned out to be 5 hours in that life science glove box. So these are all learning things. I don't think they're necessarily bad. In fact, I would argue that they're actually good for future missions. So we'll get those problems fixed, number one. And number two is, I think the right private astronaut crews will end up being a net benefit to the NASA program.
If I can maybe just add to that, obviously you can't really train completely for a zero gravity or microgravity environment. It's not something we can replicate here on Earth. So undoubtedly, there's always going to be unexpected challenges with adapting to that environment. But the other thing I would add as well is that obviously some of the research we're doing is adding very valuable additional data points to existing research, but some of it is also new and groundbreaking research, and there's no precedent for that. There's no specific benchmark or training available for that. So when you're doing things for the first time, there's inevitably going to be challenges.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. We'll take our next question from Jeff Faust. Jeff, your line should be open.
Hey, good morning. Question for anyone on the crew. you were originally scheduled to spend 8 days on the station. You ended up spending about 15 days. With that uncertainty in that second week about exactly when you would undock and splash down, how were you able to sort of best make use of that time, given you didn't know how much additional time you would have left on the station to either keep doing research or outreach or any other activities?
Well, let me take that, Jeff. Good to talk to you. It was, in a way, it was a blessing that we had the extra time. Well, not in a way. In every way, it was a blessing. But significantly, as Larry mentioned, we really front-loaded the schedule and hit the ground running pretty hard at the beginning. And I think we were so focused on research and outreach in the first one ended up being 8 or 10 days on orbit that we needed the extra time to sort of complete the experience by having time to look out the window, to make contact with friends and family, to just enjoy the sensation. And I'm so grateful that that happened, because otherwise it would have been a very different experience, I think, for these three, because again, we were running so fast at the beginning that we needed those days to sort of catch our breath and really get the full exposure of what human spaceflight is like.
Great. We're going to take, we have some of the questions that have been submitted online as well. We have a question from Emily Speck. She says, now that you experience viewing Earth from space, how do you hope to use that experience and share that with what you've learned with others? And that's Emily Speck from Fox Weather. Anyone from the crew want to take that?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Now that you've experienced viewing Earth from space, how do you hope to use that experience and share that with what you've learned with others?
So, unfortunately, only very few people gain this experience, and our objective is really to share it with as many as possible. So my mission was full, like Mike described, from arrival till departure. The structure of my work was designed by the participants. If it was the Ministry of Education, Space Agency, Israeli Space Agency, Ministry of Technology and Innovation, and the researchers and the children. So all the participants in the mission, they designed, they offered ideas what we can do on orbit, what type of experiments, outreach, subjects, lessons we can pass from there. And the fact that they actually participated and could join us live, because today you can see we had the opportunity to offer live lessons from the station. I think that will continue for a while. So the first thing we look at are mainly the output. Okay, we were so many days and hours and we did so many experiments. But the outcome of all this work will have a very long-term effect.
By the way, if I may, I'd add one other comment. I did not understand or really appreciate the impact that all of us were able to make on youth, not only in the United States, but around the world. And I think it rose to the level of being inspirational. And so I think that's one of the opportunities for Axiom in concert with NASA and SpaceX going forward in the future, where we can really add value, is really emphasizing that educational outreach. And if I ever had another opportunity to go, that would be a primary focus.
I think that's a very good point, and I don't think any of us really welcomed the unavoidable publicity that came along with this undertaking. But I think one of the upsides to that, and our responsibility at the same time, is to use that as a platform for greater leadership and advocacy and hopefully inspiration going forward. And I think that's our next big challenge, is to figure out how best to apply that going forward.
Thank you so much. Our next question will come from David Curley from Discovery.
David? Michael L.R., you talked about next chapter. Tom Marshburn talked about this the other day, that this was historic. This is a demarcation. This is the beginning of something really new and very big. Can you broadly talk about that? And Microsoft, I take it it's on Axiom to basically reduce what NASA ASAP said was the burden put on the professional crew? Thank you.
So I think I would put it in sort of very historic terms, and that is that it is the role of governments to open new frontiers. And that's whether discovering America or westward expansion in this country or low Earth orbit. And so we've been going to low Earth orbit as a species for about 60 years. And I'm not going to say it's easy by any means, nor is it routine, but it's something that we know how to do. And at some point, the governments should get out of the way and let commerce come in and do their thing. So we're talking about building an economy in low Earth orbit while the governments go do the harder stuff, back to the moon, onto Mars, etc. And in low Earth orbit, the ISS, as wonderful a platform as it is, one day will run out of gas, so to speak. It's a machine, it's going to wear out. And we want to put a commercial space station in its place and make that transition as seamless as possible. And someday there will be multiple space stations in low Earth orbit, and we'll have transportation, which has already been demonstrated by SpaceX and soon by Boeing, and destinations, which Axiom we think will be the first, and there will be others. And that is the beginning of an ecosystem. And so that is what I think this mission is, the first step in that direction toward a low Earth orbit economy.
Did it feel historic to you there on station?
You know, that's a tough question. I don't really think we thought about making history while we were up there. We were, busy doing our job and chasing the red line, as we say, which is the thing that tells you what you're supposed to be doing at any given moment. But I think in retrospect, we can probably look back and say that it was in fact historic.
Thank you. We have some questions also that have come through.
You want me to answer the other question?
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So the short answer is yes, it's incumbent on us to reduce our burden on the crew. Keep in mind, this really is a team effort. You can't help it. When you come to the International Space Station, no matter what crew comes to the International Space Station, there are certain steps that you take place to make sure the transition is good. That the first thing you do is have the safety briefing to make sure the crews know what they do in certain emergencies. The next thing is, even if you've trained on systems, it's there's some acclimation there that's necessary. But from the very beginning, because of our experience as a team, we knew that to do these flights right, you had to bring a professional with you, and that's a giant step for a company. It's not, we don't do this lightly because it's a tremendous expense, but it's what we do because it's the right way to fly these flights. So yes, over time, I think we'll reduce what the crew has to do. I think Larry's absolutely right. Over time, we will be, actually, I think we'll start seeing that the extra arms and legs and flights really is useful to NASA. And ultimately, this is very important to us because in late 2024, the first of our modules comes to the International Space Station. We'll have a permanent presence on the International Space Station, or the ISS Axiom complex. And it's very important that at that point we have figured out how to do these things as seamlessly as you can, and to make sure that you're getting the most from the crews that are on board.
Great, thank you so much. We do have some questions that come through social media that we also want to get some attention on. This is a fun one. Andrew Karoom asked, how different was it looking at Earth from looking at Google Maps? So, Mark, I know you took lots of pictures from space. What's the difference?
I think there's two elements to that. One is, I think, what visually you see differently, and obviously there's been plenty of footage taken from the space station and other places in space of the Earth, and so you can recognize the actual images and what's in front of your eyes. But what you can't replace is that emotional element of seeing it live and in person, like with anything. And so I think that element is very different, and it's and I think it's very compelling and in some cases, for me at least, overwhelming.
Let me add to that I had the opportunity to watch Earth during the night. One of the experiments I followed was taking photos of thunderstorms and lightning specifically, and the effect of lightning above the clouds. So I spent quite a large amount of hours during nighttime watching at Earth, and the views are incredible. The stars, the atmosphere, the colors. I was lucky even to see the aurora on the South Pole several times with beautiful green and red and purple colors, which Google Earth doesn't offer.
Wonderful points. We'll take another question from reporters that are on the line. Next is Robert Perlman from Collect Space. Robert?
Hi. For all 4 crew members, what would top each of your want lists of an improvement from your experience on the ISS that you'd like to see Axiom integrate into their own space station?
Well, Robert, good to talk to you. Having spent some time on the International Space Station before this, some things never change, and something that we grapple with at NASA and are still grappling with is stowage. There's just so much stuff up there that, it's a problem. When you want to go get something, you go to some location and you hope that you dig your hand in there and you can find the item that you're looking for, but that's not always the case. Interestingly, and part of that problem is that when you're finished with something, you throw it away, and we have all different kinds of trash, wet trash, dry trash, hardware, this or that. And that ends up being stored on board for a while as well, until such time that you could just put in a cargo vehicle that's going to burn up in the atmosphere on the way home. There's some work being done to be able to jettison that now with this commercial airlock that's attached to the space station, which I think will be a great improvement. And really, I think, just maybe a little modernization when it comes to IT. It's come a long way since the last time I was there, but it's still, sort of dial-up speeds when it comes to internet connections and things like that. And these are problems that are certainly fixable, but with any government program, they take their time, they want it to be done well, they want to make sure they've got all the T's crossed and I's dotted, and the result is that it's a little bit more ponderous than a commercial company can be, which is a little bit more agile. So I think this is a little bit touch of modernization. What do you guys think?
One follow-up thought to that. The Crew 3, who again, let me underscore, were phenomenal. One of the things they said to us, multiple members did, carry back this message. We've got to have more storage for all the reasons, Michael, that you talked about, as well as some technology. And all of us, I know, have already carried that back to Axiom, and Axiom was already, frankly, to their benefit, ahead of that in terms of your module design. So again, I think those are one of the added benefits we can do. The other thing that I think is important for us to talk about is we're sitting up here and we're answering the questions. But it's not just about us. It took a tremendous amount of people from Axiom, from SpaceX, from NASA, and from Crew 3 to be able to pull off this first historic and successful mission. So credit to those people, and I personally think that Axiom has a tremendous opportunity and the right people and the right strategy to really help not only commercialization, but also form our future NASA missions.
Great. Our next question will come from Javier Gregory. Javier? Javier, your line is open. Well, as we figure that out, we have a number of questions that have come in through social media and through the chat. So we have a question for Larry from Thomas Gano. He says, Larry, after your underseas and space adventures, what could be next for you? Any new goals or directions? What's next on your to-do list? Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks for the question. And frankly, this would be extremely difficult to top the experience. But we have a couple of ideas that we're thinking about. One of them in concert with Axiom. It's nothing I can really talk about now. I am set to go down to Fort Bragg next week and work with some people down there. We're going to be doing a high altitude skydive from 30,000 feet sometime this summer, with actually some research embedded in that. For some reason, there haven't been, shall we say, a little bit older people who have done that, and so I'm apparently a good candidate to do that. So to me, though, it's about each opportunity and trying to do a good job and trying to do it professionally and really focusing kind of in the moment and on the process. And yeah, I just couldn't be more thrilled to have had the opportunity to work with this crew of super talented, committed people, Axiom and everybody else.
Thank you, Larry. I would expect nothing less from you. I think Javier is ready now to ask his question. Javier, your line's open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Yes, I'm sorry.
No problem.
I have a little problem. This is Javier Gregory from Cadena Ser, it's the biggest radio in Spain. I would like to ask a question to Michael López Alegría, if possible, in Spanish. ¿Es possible in Spanish?
Sí, cómo no.
Gracias. Hola, Miguel. Quería preguntarte dos cosas rápidas. La primera es, ¿cómo has visto España desde el espacio en este, que creo que es tu sexto viaje? ¿Cómo la has visto? No sé si la has visto tan seca como en el primer viaje que nos contabas. Ha llovido bastante más durante estos últimos meses. No sé si has visto algo extraño, algo que te guste, que te haya llamado la atención, si has hecho alguna foto, algún detalle. Y luego, España acaba de crear la primera agencia espacial española. ¿Qué consejos les podrías dar tú para empezar? ¿Crees que empresas como Axiom, esta colaboración con grandes empresas privadas, podría ser un buen camino, no solo colaborar con NASA o con la Agencia Espacial Europea? Gracias.
Hola Javier, un saludo. Primero, he visto España muy rápido, o sea que ya sabes que cuando atravesamos un continente en minutos, ver España es un poco difícil, sobre todo para sacar una foto de dónde están las familias o los amigos. La verdad es que no noté la diferencia en el color por la lluvia que en misiones anteriores. Pero siempre cuando ves un terreno donde tienes queridos, es una cosa que te toca el alma, que es muy especial. En cuanto a la agencia, pues mira, yo creo que, y siempre he dicho, que España tiene mucho talento, gente muy bien preparada, y yo veo que el horizonte es muy abierto para empresas, tanto como Axiom, pero otros también que puedan elaborar cosas en el espacio. Y estoy entusiasmado que esto ya tiene un paso más adelante, que para mí es un poco tarde. Yo creo que siempre España ha tenido pues esos recursos y ya es hora que ponemos un pie adelante. Gracias.
Great. And just for a quick translation, the question was, were you able to see Spain from the ISS? Was it as dry as you saw it from last time you were there? I guess there's been some rain lately. And asking about the collaboration with Spain's space agency and Axiom. And Emily's answer, abbreviated, was too fast. The space station goes at 17,500 miles per hour, as many of you know. And that Spain, and it's a place that's very important to him, and that Spain has a lot of talent. Did I get that right, Emily?
Right on.
All right. So our next question will open up the line to Mary Liz Bender. Mary Liz, your line is now open.
Thanks so much, Bettina. I wanted to ask Eitan, just before liftoff, you read a piece of a really beautiful poem called Ithaca. And I was curious if you could explain your inspiration for that, why you read that poem, and perhaps for anyone that wants to answer, now that you've had this incredible experience, what poem or art or way would you translate that experience for future space travelers? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. The poem, for me, signs that although my dream was to reach space, that's not the final objective. It's part of a journey. It's part of a lifetime journey that is guided by values and not by objectives of reaching a certain location. And this Greek poem expresses that in a very clear and loud way. I received from a group of scholars, Israeli scholars, professors, about 15 pieces of international and Israeli poetry texts that I could read while watching Earth, coming from Sophocles, from Freud, from different authors, and it's difficult for me to translate it into English because I read it in Hebrew, but it includes Albert Camus, of his view of the quality of man that has much more to admire than to despise. And Sophocles, it says that there are so many beautiful things in the creation in the universe, but the most exciting one is man, is human, and more. So I think this mission is not only about science, accurate sciences and mathematics, but also about the vision and the future of mankind, humankind.
Well said.
Beautiful response. Our next question will be from Micah Maidenberg from Wall Street Journal. Micah, your line is open now.
Hey everybody, just a quick one from Michael Safradini. Mike, you talked last month a bit about demand for future flights and how some customers were looking to see how the first mission went. Any update there? Have you had new seats sold or a new demand, or has it gone the other way? Thanks.
No, it hasn't gone the other way. Yes, we did announce one of them. We've signed actually. I think 3 since the mission. So one of them we did announce the partnership with United Arab Emirates and a 180-day mission there. There are 2, we filled 3 other seats as a result of the flight. I can't tell you who they are yet, but yeah, it's been very active. In fact, I just got back from signing a contract yesterday in Florida.
So lots going on here at Axiom. We'll keep you all posted, so stay tuned. We have so many questions. We're getting close to the end, so please bear with me. We're going to open up the line to Stephen Clark to ask his question. Stephen.
Thank you for taking my question. Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now here. Congratulations on the mission. I think a couple of quick questions first for Suf. Looking ahead to AX2, I know the plan right now is to have that around the same planned duration of AX1, about 8 days on the ISS. Given the experience of the schedule and everything being kind of jam-packed for AX1, any discussion with NASA about changing the duration of the AX2 mission, excuse me? And also for the crew members, are any of you, and I'm sure you'd all love to go to space again, but are any of you seriously thinking about traveling to space again after your experience on AX-1?
So the answer to the first part of that question is, we're in the middle of quite an extensive lessons learned effort, and we're looking, at everything: pre-flight training, medical prep, quarantine, post-landing, real-time operations. Training is, of course, a big thing. And so we're doing that together with, of course, the crew, NASA, all of our teams, and SpaceX. So we're in the middle of that. We hope to wrap it up by about midday on Monday with all the inputs in, and once we've collected that and started to work on the solutions to those that we're going to solve, then we'll be able to understand any impacts that we might want to do to how we operate AX-2. From NASA's perspective, though, they're fitting us in. If you look at the life support system on the International Space Station, you look at the number of docking ports. It's quite an impact to have extra crew on board than what they planned for any long length of time. We do it semi-regularly for a few days, like the crew flew, and so I would not expect us to extend the length of the mission substantially, but this flight was really wildly successful. So from our perspective, we will go be a little more efficient, train a little differently, do a few things to help out the timeline, and we'll go fly another successful mission within the time frame that NASA allows us to be there.
Thank you, Seth. Our next question will come from Jordan Soto of the Space Channel. The Space Channel. Jordan?
Hey, thank you so much for taking my question. I'm Jordan Soto from Space Channel here. During your downtime, if you had any, were you able to watch any space movies, maybe some alien movies or anything like that?
Hey, Jordan. So actually, we did see a space movie. It's a bit of a tradition to have a crew movie night on Saturday evenings. So together with our Russian colleagues and the 4 USOS crew members, we watched a couple of movies, and one of them was actually in Russian about a Salyut space station. It was based in fact. It was obviously a dramatized version of it, but I learned a lot. There were no aliens that I
Thanks. And I will say that the team did have a really busy time. 14-hour days. I think one of my favorite moments from the mission is when we did an event with some students, and Larry got this question, and he reminded us, they worked 14-hour days. They did not have a lot of downtime, and that's why they were able to complete so many science experiments and so many outreach events in over 5 different languages that I like to remember. Our next question will come from Ken Kramer. Ken, your line is open. Ken?
Yes, can
Great.
you hear me now?
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Yeah, my question is for Mike Suffredini. One of the previous briefings, I asked your colleague Hussman about whether you would do longer term missions, and he said 30 to 60 days is something you were talking about with NASA. So I'm wondering, have you made any progress on that, when that might happen? Thanks.
Well, as you can imagine, with this flight, and the extra interest, we do need to define our next several flights. We do have a 30-day mission planned, actually 2 of them planned, and we'll talk more about those in the future. Beyond about 30 days, our NASA colleagues are working with us to see if we would like to get to 60 days, and then ultimately we'll do multiple long duration flights. The UAE flight was the first commercial long duration flight, but we expect to do multiples. But really, at that point, we need our spacecraft. With our first module, we'll add life support for 4 crew and an extra docking port, and then 6 months later, the next one will come. We'll have 8 crew quarter capabilities and 2 docking ports, and so at that point, then the length of time is really not that critical. So the plans to do that towards the end of 2024. So the missions between now and then likely will stay at something between 30 and 60 days at the longest, although we'll continue to do shorter missions as well.
Thank you. We have a question from CBC for Mark. How did the holoportation experiment perform while in orbit? Can you describe the hardware and what you're able to experience? I know you talked a little bit about the beginning, but for those that don't understand what holoportation is, can you explain a little bit about what you were able to achieve? Because it really was some groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, it was for me. It was kind of something right out of Star Trek, and the hardware is a sort of is a lens. It's you wear on your head. It's not quite like a virtual reality headset, because you can actually still see what's in your actual physical environment, so you see through it. And then you are also able to, if successful as this was, you then see the individual or individuals on the other end, in this case on Earth, as a hologram in front of you. So I think it's really incredible technology, and you can take photographs, and it looks like that person's sitting or standing right in front of you in the same room. And I think it's got a lot of great applications for not just for future space travel, but for telemedicine here on Earth, for just maintaining social contact, for a number of benefits in the here and now, in addition to, especially for long duration space flight and medical consultation, and just overcoming the challenges of isolation during long-term space flight.
Wonderful. And I think one of the greatest things about working at Axiom, right here, we're in mission control, a lot of the science that we integrated, and I think one of the big successes that came out of this mission was the integration that we were able to successfully do seamlessly with NASA. I don't know if like MLA, you want to talk a little bit about that, about the success of the integration of the science, or any of the team members, because all of you did so much science on this mission. I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to highlight that.
Yeah, well, as Larry pointed out, it was fundamental to our mission to perform all the science, and that doesn't happen in a vacuum, no pun intended. I mean, this is really a giant team from Axiom, from the ISS National Lab, formerly known as CASIS, from NASA itself, the payload developers all over the world, especially Canada and Israel and in the Ohio region. And so this team came together and produced a suite of experiments in, I think it's about a 2 or 3 year timeline. It's typically how long it takes to integrate a payload. And in our case, most of it was done in 6 months or less. And so the fact that they were able to pull this off is kind of a minor miracle. And again, thanks to just a lot of teamwork from a lot of people all over the place.
Fantastic. We'll take a question now from Mike Wall. Mike, your line is open.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, this is probably for Mike Suffredini. You guys are kind of you're working toward building like a private space station in Earth orbit, and I was just wondering. I mean, I know you're still going through the sort of lessons learned from this initial flight. But what have you learned so far, do you think, about operating your own space station based on this first experience with the Ax-1 astronauts? And if the Ax-1 astronauts have any thoughts on that too, thoughts about how private space station operations could be run or could be run better, I'd be happy to hear them too. Thank you.
So that's a great question. I've been in this business for almost 40 years, and there's a lot we've learned over even that time that we apply to the design of our station. So each flight teaches us more. So really for us, the precursor missions play, one of the biggest roles they play is helping us and NASA work together, and our launch provider work together as we get bigger on orbit, and as station crew, which is already 7 crew, as we grow on orbit. The real objective is to figure out how we're going to work together closely, so and be able to enhance each other as opposed to get in each other's way. So we've spent almost the whole time talking about this very thing today, and so what we experienced on Ax-1 and how we solved some of those challenges for Ax-2 and beyond are exactly the kinds of things that were why we fly these, and why we don't consider these just independent flights. These are really precursor missions to make sure that together between ourselves and NASA, that when we get to the point where our module shows up, we know how to do this. We know how to fly and really enhance and work through some of these potential challenges now when we're on shorter day missions. That's really the reason to go to slightly longer day missions, so that we can continue to challenge ourselves and make sure we're ready for the big day when our module arrives. So all of these things you've heard today really are part of that effort to learn how to work together in space.
Thank you. We have time for one last question. It's going to be, our last question was written in by Seth Kurkowski from Space Explorer. This is from MLA. What was it like to return to the ISS as a private astronaut versus when you were there at NASA?
Yeah, great question. It was a mixed bag. Part of it felt extraordinarily familiar. I've told people that it's not like going back to your home, but it's like going to maybe your parents' home where you grew up, or that's been slightly remodeled since you were there last. So the station is literally twice as big as it was when I was there last. So there were modules that, of course, didn't exist. But the sensations, you know, sort of the feeling of the topology and floating around, all that felt really familiar. I think what was different is, you know, we were guests of the NASA and International Partner Crews, and that was very paramount in our heads. And so I think that was always in the back of my mind, you know, how is the crew doing? And these guys are super courteous to the Crew 3, and conversely, Crew 3 was extraordinarily gracious with us. So it felt different in that, you know, in both ways. It wasn't my home, but it was a home that I was very familiar with, and it was very, very gratifying.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today as we wrap up this Ax-1 mission press conference and this incredible journey as we expand commercial space flight. For more information about Ax-1 and Axiom Space and our future space station, Axiom Station, please go to axiomspace.com or our social media channels. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great day.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you may be tuning in from around the world, welcome to the live broadcast of the launch of Axiom Mission 1, often called Ax-1. There they are. We're getting our first look at the Axiom 1 crew as they exit the suit-up room. Michael Lopez Alegria, Larry Connor, Eitan Stiva, and Mark Pathy.
Space exploration has always been about inspiring others, and this Ax-1 mission is bringing about a new type of inspiration for the world.
Launch day is finally here. Your cargo is packed and ready, and we can't wait to see you on orbit. Go Ax-1.
And we get our first look here now as crew is walking towards the White Room, getting ready for ingress into their Dragon capsule. Today's launch marks the next step in the evolution of this human spaceflight story. This is the first of a number of private astronaut missions by Axiom Space to the International Space Station, and it represents the culmination of years of hard work between both government and private entities to open up the doors to low Earth orbit.
We're so incredibly proud to partner with Axiom Space to have created the MEOs for the Ax-1 multinational crew headed to the International Space Station.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Stop. Go Falcon, go Dragon. Godspeed, Axiom 1.
Together, a new chapter begins. Godspeed, Ax-1.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Good morning, day, or evening, or night, Earth. This is the good ship Endeavor. So far, our Crew Dragon's been our home. We had a pretty good night's sleep last night. After launching yesterday, for us, it was very exciting. Obviously, what a ride. I think there were smiles that are still being worn by the crew this morning. I'd like to thank SpaceX for an amazing vehicle and for Axiom to putting all this together. The launch itself was absolutely amazing and thrilling.
It's just getting used to zero-G and everything that entails and all the challenges that presents, but we're getting used to it. So by the time we get to the space station, we should be ready to rock.
שלום לכולם כאן בדרגון. אנחנו כבר התרגלנו למצב של חוסר כבידה ומתחילים להתנהל בנוחיות וביעילות.
2 meters. Soft capture complete.
SpaceX Endeavor, copy all. Good.
hatches were opened, the crew boarded the International Space Station and were welcomed by the members of Expedition 67.
The Expedition 67 crew, all of us are incredibly thrilled and excited to welcome Axiom on board. And on this historic day for continued, we expect long-term cooperation with NASA, with our international partners, and with private companies and private astronauts. We're ready to go to work.
The key mission objectives for Ax-1 have always been scientific research and outreach, performing meaningful science while still taking the time to communicate out the impact and application of that research.
One of the big ones that Larry was focused on was an experiment called Aging and Heart Health. We did the very first two-way holoportation from space.
Well, it's been a busy day. I actually brought some notes just to be able to keep up with it all. Fluidic space optics. It's a project where you actually are using microgravity and the physics of surface tension to take a polymer that's a liquid and put it into a frame to form a spherical lens.
This is really the opening of a new era, where it's not just government astronauts like it's been for the last 60 years.
As part of the Rakia mission, he is dedicating 100% of his time to education, art, technology, and science.
יש גם משקפת, ויש מצלמה עם זום כזה עצום.
They have definitely been busy since the day they docked on the International Space Station, so it's been great to see all that they have accomplished until now.
The grand vision is to work on the future of space architecture. How can we build space stations, future space habitats bigger than the biggest rocket payload fairing that we currently have available? And the way that my research looks at doing this is through autonomous robotic self-assembly.
All of these things are pretty surreal, and just the whole experience looking out of the window that we call the cupola and a view of the Earth, which we're some 250 miles above.
It was beautiful, amazing, emotional. It was really a special moment.
אנחנו עפים מעל כדור הארץ במהירות עצומה, וכל 45 דקות יש או זריחה או שקיעה. רואים כדור מדהים, באמת יפה ושלם ולא רואים גבולות.
MLA had a very fun day today. He had an event with Black Buck, an artist, and MLA actually played a musical keyboard and did a duet with Black Buck from space.
One of the things that has struck me is it's nice to see short duration crew members come up to go out on the space station and only spend 8 to 10 days and then come back home and tell their story. And it's been just a pleasure to watch our crew members get up there and for the first time experience space. Going to space is it's an adventure. It's fun a lot of times, but a lot of times it's not. It's hard work.
It was really fun to open up my bag and see this in there when I got here. And I remember that time that we had together in Mantua.
From a sort of a crew perspective, at least personally, I think I could speak for all of us, it's been an amazing experience. We think that in the future, this will be something that we can share with more and more of humanity, and will make humankind all the better for it.
With the weather now looking good, we're very excited to bring you live coverage of the beginning of the return to Earth of Ax-1, the first all-private astronaut mission to the International Space Station.
And right on time, physical separation confirmed. Burns are nominal so far. SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the first private astronaut crew, Ax-1, separating from the International Space Station, concluding their 15 days aboard the orbiting lavatory. Flight controllers are tracking a good departure of SpaceX Dragon Endeavour and the Ax-1 crew inside. Everything's looking good.
There's our first view of Dragon Endeavour re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Dragon, SpaceX, comm check.
Lots clear, Sarah. Crew's doing fine.
Copy that. Great to hear from you.
There we go. Approach deploy now. All right, just a 4 minutes to go.
As you can tell by the cheers behind us, we can confirm that the Dragon capsule with the Ax-1 crew has splashed down.
On behalf of the entire SpaceX team, welcome back to planet Earth. The Axiom 1 mission marks the beginning of a new paradigm for human spaceflight. We hope you enjoyed the extra few days in space, and thanks for choosing to fly with SpaceX.
Camera making way to see our crew for the first time there. All waving, all in good spirits.
See a bunch of thumbs up.
Welcome home, Ax-1.
The Ax-1 mission is one of the more visible milestones of our journey to ensure that space travel is opened up to more and more of the brightest minds and eager explorers from around the world who want to make our home planet a better place. To the crew of Ax-1, well done.